Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Avorion episode 64. I'm Enigmius and today we're navigating probably the last of the really nasty curves in this profile for the back end of the Chariot. Last episode we were just kind of meandering our way through and doing our best to get some sort of progress to show for our efforts. And this time around, it's the same thing. And the challenge here is we've got a lot of different curves, a lot of different angles coming together in the same place, all at the same time. And we have to try and make them fit in a way that we're going to be happy with. The ideal situation would be seamless, where it just sort of flows and it follows all of the contours that we want it to. And that's the beginning and the end of it. The reality is that it's really very, very difficult to do that. So it's going to be a little bit of improvisation and a little bit of technique. I think is going to be there's got to be a balance that we can strike in there. Now, I am becoming very convinced that this whole strategy of using the hologram blocks to force the game to allow you to overlap blocks more than it normally would has been nerfed out of the game. I can't make it work. It's this section here. You could see I placed some hologram blocks. I've got some hologram blocks still in place on the right side, and trying to place that large wedge block that was only overlapping with the hologram blocks wouldn't let me do it. So one of the things that I considered is that maybe they all have to be hologram blocks to start off. It's not enough to have just half of them hologram blocks, and then the blocks that you want to place that are overlapping can be your block of choice. And I tried that as well, and it didn't work. It wouldn't let me place the blocks, which is, to be completely honest, I'm not surprised. And this was one of my reservations about using this method in the past, is it seems like one of those things that's a little bit cheaty. It seems like maybe it wasn't intended. And because of that, there's always that risk, especially in an early access game where you're going to sign into the game one day and the ability to do that will be gone. It could also be that I'm just simply trying to do it wrong and that it does work, and if I was doing it properly, it would work just fine and I wouldn't have any issues at all. So there's all kinds of different things that could be causing the problem, one of them being user error. But for the time being, it wasn't working for me, and that was really all I had to go by. This part here, you can see we're kind of working in a V sort of shaped area, and we're trying to make everything come together as uniformly as possible. And it seems to be working, which is kind of nice. But at the same time, there starts to be a point where things just don't really want to line up properly anymore. I'm trying to really nail down the habit that I'm in that creates these little hairline gaps and these little wee tiny seams that are smaller than the block size, the scale of the blocks that we're working with. I understand that it's directly related to trying to attach blocks together but not being accurate with the mouse in terms of where it is before we commit to place the blocks. But at the same time, there's a feeling that I get when I realize that I've missed. You know, there's just maybe even if you don't necessarily see it consciously, there's something in the back of your mind that says, we missed that one, so check it and make sure that it's lined up. But it never seems to work that way. It's always something that I come across several rows later when I see that little wee tiny hairline seam, or hairline, it's not the seam, it's like an overhang. It's like it doesn't quite line up properly, or where it's got the little tiny hairline crack, the space between the blocks that indicates that there was a miss, and then all of the blocks that attached to that missed block were out of alignment. It's very strange, and it's a habit that I wish I could get out of, but at the present moment, I've just simply decided that there's a point of no return where if I notice that little seam or that little crack beyond a certain point, I just leave it. It's not worth pulling everything apart in order to correct it. I don't think it's going to have an impact on the actual survivability of the ship. I don't think it's going to be the kind of situation where, because of the way the game renders everything, it's going to treat that as a gap that can be shot through, stuff like. I mean, it's an aesthetic thing primarily for me, and since I can't necessarily solve it without adding a significant amount of extra time, I've decided that we're just gonna leave it if we realize too late that that's what's happening. Now this part here, I wanted to start copying and pasting the rows that we're working with just to save the time, and as you just saw and as you're seeing again here, it, for some strange reason, it wasn't lined up in such a way that they would copy properly from one row to the next. There was like this overhang, a very substantial overhang that it was leaving, and I was trying. Here it is again. I thought I fixed it. I thought I got rid of it, and it's still there, that overhang. And there was a part of me that looked at it and said, you know, maybe we could leave that, because it does have kind of an interesting look to it. But at the same time, it didn't really fit with everything else that was going on. It's the kind of thing that I would probably be more inclined to leave on a conventional offensive ship, like a destroyer or something like that, where having it look a little bit more aggressive and a little bit meaner definitely makes sense. In this case, it's, you know, it's a carrier, and everything else on this ship is lined up a little bit better. It's a little smoother. So I decided to forego that for the time being. But here, using a smaller segment to start off and copying and pasting, it just saves so much time. And realistically, at this point, the repetition of placing the blocks is not necessarily adding any entertainment value to the game. There's a limit to it. Here we are trying again with the hologram blocks, and you can see we just changed a couple of very large ones to hologram blocks, and now trying to figure out how to get things to overlap the way that it's supposed to, technically, based on the rule, based on the whole concept, and it doesn't want to work. It's the strangest thing, and it doesn't seem like it should be so complicated that it would be difficult to figure out how to make it work. But we encountered that issue where it doesn't want to come together the way we sort of expected it to. This section here, another group of blocks that we can cut and paste, but in addition to that, we were able to use larger blocks than what the original called for, so we're actually cutting down on the block count fairly significantly for this specific section of the ship, which is always a good thing. We're running a little over 10,000 blocks by this point in the build, which is not necessarily bad. We honestly don't have that much more left to do. Once we get this back section done and closed in, that's basically 90% of the ship done. You can see we've got sort of a void between the two halves of the area that we're working in, and that will be filled in a relatively simple fashion. It's not going to take a lot of blocks to fill that in. So we're actually, for the block count in the grand scheme of things, we're doing not too badly for a ship of this size. I haven't decided yet if this is the actual finished size of the ship that I want, or if it's more in the line of something that we're going to be scaling up once we get everything taken care of. The thing is, I see all these other ships that are just kind of flying around in this area, hostile ships, friendly ships, and they're bigger than this ship. Maybe not in overall mass, but just in dimensions. They tend to be, you know, you get the stick ships that are very, very long, but even some of like the freighters that I see, they're larger than this ship, which suggests to me that by the time we get to the center of the galaxy, that they're going to be considerably larger, and you can't have a tiny carrier. It's not going to work. What I may end up doing is just kind of rolling with it, keeping the size that it is for now, And then if we find ourselves feeling inadequate later on and needing some more size in order to feel better about ourselves, then we can rescale the ship from a blueprint. And that would be probably the easiest way to approach it in terms of just making sure that everything makes sense. You know, visually, when you're fighting the bad guys, it doesn't look like your carrier is being dwarfed by everything that it fights. Now, this particular transition that I just put in was a little bit of taking the easy way out. We could have forced a more intricate transition. You can see here we're just kind of fitting everything together. But at the same time, this is one of those areas of the ship that it's not going to get a lot of attention from your eyes. It's kind of tucked away in a spot where you have to be looking at it from a very specific angle before you can even notice it, even more so than some of the other things that we've been talking about, and the concern being that if you see it, you might not like it. So, you know, trying to do it as best we can, even though it's not necessarily visible. Well, this little section in here that we're working on, the gap between that large copy and pasted profile and the rest of the hull, it's very, very easy to overlook, and everything is lining up, everything is fitting together the way that it's supposed to. It's just a very sudden shift in the profile. We went from the curved profile to very flat, cutting over to the piece that we cut and paste from the front of the ship. So it's coming together. This is, like I say, the last of the really gnarly sections that we have to work our way through in order to get everything done. There's going to be some more work that we have to do at the top of this aft section of the ship, basically directly above everything that we've been working on in this episode, that we just have to be a little bit careful about, but it's going to be a little bit, hopefully a little bit more straightforward in terms of what we have to do in order to make it all come together and fit the way that we want it to. So the progress in this particular section of the ship kind of slowed down compared to everything else that we were doing, but it was an understandable slowdown given what it was that we were trying to accomplish. You can see here still trying to force these two pieces, these two sections of the ship to come together, and they're just not. Usually there's quite a gap there between what we just placed and what we were working on immediately before this. And I kind of had to stop and look at it for a second and think about exactly what it was that I was trying to accomplish and how I could make it work. There's only so many options you have to close a gap of this size, and you can see I'm taking advantage of the profile that we built directly above this section where we're working in now, where it just cuts across flat. Bob's your uncle. That's it. That's all it has to be. And then we can do a little bit of detailing in order to just kind of add visual interest, make it look like it makes a little bit more sense, and then it's done. And it's something that we can kind of move on from and not necessarily have to worry about, because again, its location is in a particular spot where it's not going to be drawing your attention. Even if you're looking around the outside of the ship, it's not going to stand out as something where we sort of phoned it in and just decided not to apply ourselves or put in the effort in order to make it work. And again, trying with the holograms and not working. Not working at all. You could see that there were some blocks that we could place, but they would have fit with or without the holograms. There wasn't that much overlap. But in this case here, trying to get this block to fit, we've got basically only holograms in the way, and it says no. It's not having any of that. There's only so much that it's willing to tolerate from us. So who knows? I'll keep at it. I'll keep trying it from time to time just to try and get things sorted. But realistically speaking, at this point, I'm about 90% convinced that the option to use holograms to kind of bypass the overlap restrictions may have been adjusted. Let's call it adjusted. Let's not call it nerfed or removed. We'll just say adjusted, and it's taking us a little while to figure out exactly what's going on. In the next episode, we're going to be hopefully finishing off most of this back end. I would like to kind of have this done, and then once it is done, then we can focus a little bit on the equipment that we still need to add to the ship in order to make it work the way that we want it to. and aesthetic details, putting in the little things that kind of finish it off, give it a finished look, like it was everything was done on purpose and everything has a function, even if it doesn't. And then we'll be able to look at some fighter designs, hopefully, and we'll actually be able to go and pick up the fighters that we make from Fighter Factory and test them out, see how our carrier does in this system. There's bad guys here all the time shooting at things, so it shouldn't be too difficult to deploy some fighters and let them do what they do and see how everything performs. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes in this and other series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.